Hey nerds, what's up? Today we're going to talk about star ratings when it comes to rating books. You see it everywhere. It is on Goodreads, it is on Amazon, it is on Bookstagram, it is on BookTube. Everyone seems to use this as a general way to rate books. Honestly, I never questioned star ratings before I got on YouTube. It just seemed like something that was synonymous with giving a book review, and so I didn't even know there was a discussion on the validity or usefulness of star ratings until I got more into the book community. And now that I'm in it, I feel like we need to talk about it. So today we're going to talk about the controversy around the uselessness of star ratings, why I'm still personally for them, and of course, a mini history lesson on star ratings. See you after the jump. So let's do a very brief history of star ratings. So using symbols to rate things is often credited towards Mariana Stark's use of exclamation points to rate different works of art in her 1820 guidebook for art. After that, various forms of star ratings evolved from first rating restaurants, hotels, and then movies, and of course, books. For books, the first known usage of star ratings was in 1915 by David O'Brien in his work, The Best American Short Stories, which was obviously a book rating short stories. He rated these stories on a scale of 1 to 3 stars. Now, obviously, star ratings were probably used very frequently in newspapers, magazines, or other official forms of book rating over the years, especially in official formats. But it's important to note that we never really saw star ratings in things like bookstores or libraries growing up. Really, star ratings were reserved for professional reviewers who had an outlet to talk about their feelings. It's very clear that the rise of mass star ratings has come with the internet. The internet has provided multiple ways for the average user to give their opinion on pretty much anything from products to books. And honestly, I would say that it wasn't even popular to use star ratings for books until there were websites that were specifically dedicated to books, like Goodreads and Amazon, where it becomes increasingly easy to just leave that star rating on how we felt about a book. In fact, it's almost encouraged, right? They say, if you liked this, leave a review. Now, Goodreads wasn't founded until 2006. Of course, Amazon was founded in 1994, but I would say star ratings for things like books weren't popularized too much later. So really, this idea of mass star ratings is actually a pretty new one. 2006 was only 15 years ago. And Instagram and YouTube and those rise are even a little bit later. So this idea of very easily giving out star ratings is a new one. It's modern. So let's move into the problems with star ratings. The biggest and most obvious problem with star ratings is that there is no standardized meaning for what each star means. Let's, for example, look at what Goodreads star ratings officially mean. 1 star means you didn't like it, 2 star means it was okay, 3 star means I like it, 4 stars means I really liked it, and 5 star means it was amazing. Now this one always surprises me. I didn't actually know what the official Goodreads star ratings was until I saw someone give a book a 2-star review and then say they liked it. They said, well, Goodreads tells me if I give it 2 stars, it was okay. And this book was okay. But I think most of us have internalized that an okay book falls in the middle, which would be 3 stars. So because nobody follows the same star ratings, overall ratings on Goodreads can be confusing and not very useful, because what is everyone saying about a book when 3 stars can mean vastly different things for different people? Honestly, no matter how much searching I did, I couldn't find any other official star ratings for places like Amazon or Storygraph or any of those other big websites. No one even puts it out there about what their average star rating is. In fact, those websites seem to give up and just leave it up to the user to decide what they think. There's also this huge issue of Amazon and Goodreads not even trying to verify if you've purchased or read a book, which leads to books like Doors of Stone having over 4,000 reviews on Goodreads. I remember Patrick Rothfuss joking a long time ago about this. I think it was maybe back in 2015. So I couldn't find the official quote, but I swear I remember reading this where he joked like, well, I'm glad all those time travelers have confidence in me that it's a 5-star book, which seems really ironic now since it still isn't published. But yes, how can we have such a good rating for a book that doesn't even literally exist yet? I remember another particularly funny example of this, which was the Divergent trilogy. I read that trilogy, I think right after the 3rd book came out. I finished the whole thing, and when I went to look at reviews, I remember being super tickled by the fact that the 3rd installment had a ton of 5-star reviews before the series came out all being like, I love this series, I'm so excited for this book. And then there was a hard cut where all of a sudden there was a ton of bad reviews about the book after it came out because something happened in the end of that book that fans really disliked. And I just found that so funny that you could see the clear line from the 5 stars before this book was published and the 2 and 1 star reviews after the book was published. So anyway, the point being, these random things throw off ratings, and when you go to Amazon, there's other things that can throw off ratings. For example, people complaining about a book becoming damaged. So it arrives damaged, they give it 1 star, they say the customer service wasn't good. Well, that's not really a review of the book, and there's no way to filter out those. And then there are people who DNF books and give it a 1-star rating, which I am personally very against, and I can talk more about that later. A particular example of this I remember was after I read The 5th Season, which was a book I really loved, but somebody left a review and said that they DNF'd it after page 3 because a child comes to harm. And they say they are not interested in reading books where a child is harmed, and they go on this big rant about how terrible it is. They DNF'd this book at page 3. And gave it a 1 star. How could you possibly rate a book after 3 pages? That's totally fine if you want to stop reading it because it's not your thing, but you just shouldn't rate it. So again, another thing that throws off ratings. Anyway, I could go on and on. Some people are super harsh and give really low ratings to pretty much everything, and then you have the opposite where there's people who give 5 stars to everything. It just doesn't really tell you much. And then if we go to the personal side of things, sometimes you rate a book right after reading it, and then the further you get from the book, the less you like it. That's happened to me. Or the opposite has happened, where I rate a book, let's say 4 stars or something, but then the further I get from it, the more and more I can't stop thinking about this book, and the more and more I realize I actually liked it. But we rarely go back and edit those star ratings. I remember in particular, this happened with How You Lose the Time War. I rated it 4 stars right after I read it because I did have some issues with it, even though I generally really liked it. But by the end of the year, I ended up rating it one of my top 5 books of the year over books that I had rated 5 stars because that was the book that stuck with me and that means something to me. Have I ever gone back and fixed the rating? No, I still say it's 4 stars, even though it really had an effect on me. And again, like, how are we even rating that? The scale is so bizarre. Like, when do you rate a book because it's technically perfect versus a book that influenced you or affected you even if it wasn't perfect? And then you could take 20 books that you rated 3 stars, but you'd be able to clearly define which was a better 3 stars and which wasn't a better 3 stars. I don't know, it's complicated. There's not enough numbers. So anyway, I get this. I get all these problems, and as I see people discuss these problems, I understand them. But I still like star ratings. It's just that it's sometimes sort of annoying to read a review without a rating. It's like, just give me a ballpark, you know? Like, that's really what a star rating is. It's just a ballpark. It's just giving you an idea. Did the goods outweigh the bad? Did the bad outweigh the good? And a star rating can kind of give you that impression. I will admit, I rarely trust the Goodreads overall rating anymore. I don't really think it means much to me. It feels like almost all the books have ended up being about the same rating because there's just so many people with different systems that it's just kind of hard to tell in that average. Instead, I think a star rating matters more with the individual reviewer. I do have some very specific opinions about some things with star ratings that may be controversial. The first is that I am extremely against people giving star ratings to books they DNF. I don't think you should do it. Don't even get me started on reviewing books that haven't been published. You should never give a star rating to a book that hasn't been published, that you haven't read. A star rating without a text review to go with it is basically completely useless, especially if it's a negative review. Overall, a star rating is the most useful when you get to know a reviewer. You know what it means to them. I have people who have followed me on Instagram for a while and start knowing that a 5-star review means a big deal to me. That someone once said that I would take a 0.5 off for almost anything, and it's true. People know my individual tastes and know my rating system, and then it becomes useful. So I think you end up choosing reviewers that you trust, and getting to know them and their star ratings is when it becomes the most useful. Okay, let's get into your guys' thoughts on star ratings. I polled my Instagram community about how they felt about star ratings, and I'm gonna share some of the interesting things that you guys told me. When I opened it up, the most common response I got is what I already said, which is that star ratings are the most useful when it's tied to an individual reviewer and when you know that reviewer. So it seems like we all generally agree on that. And a lot of people also said that they felt like star ratings were a necessary evil and they were great to giving you that high level feel, as I said before. She Was Only Evie said, star ratings are for in the moment experience, not necessarily reflective of longevity. I gave Piranesi 4 stars and The Princess Bride 3 stars when I initially read them, but haven't been able to stop thinking about them since, so they became faves of 2021. I really love that. That's basically what I said before about how star ratings are evolving a lot of the times, and it may give you a ballpark for in the moment, but it really can't say what you overall feel about it, which can be frustrating, but It's just the reality. And then there were people like Tom or Gavin who said things like, I voted down, love of a book is too subjective, loved it, liked it, didn't care for it, disliked it, recommend. That's his own personal ratings. Gavin said, I know when I love a book or if I just don't click with a book, but it's hard picking numbers on a scale. So some people really like the idea of just giving a general word for it, like I didn't click with this or I loved this, and not actually specifying a number. Lay Ruiz 97 said, let me do a half star, that's all I ask. I am a huge fan of the half star, but I do get a little confused when people do the quarter star. That's too much for me personally. I'll give it to you guys though. You can have the quarter star if you want. I love a half star. If you really hate half stars, you should go be friends with Michael Nip. He hates half stars.
Now, if you've seen my channel for very much time, you would know that I use the 5-star system and I don't use half stars because half stars are for cowards.
I don't know if he's ever given that opinion in one single video. He did talk about it in Alan's video, which I can link below, and he talked about it once in another video that I'll link. But I know some people hate half stars, so you give me your opinion on that. I need the half because there's a lot of books I love but feel like they're not quite 5 stars. So the 4.5 is that perfect rating. I feel like when I use a half star, it's mostly a 4.5, but I like them. So anyway, you guys tell me that. Then my friend Heidi said, it's helpful when you're looking into new books, but she also feels stressed sometimes about leaving a star review, especially if her opinion is not a popular one. And I definitely feel that way. It's much easier to give a star rating when you love a book. I have given some bad star ratings to books that I knew were well loved, and it is stressful, but you feel like you have to say how you feel about it. The other time it can be difficult that I was just thinking now is when you read a book that you know is very famous, but you feel unequipped to really understand it, which is how I felt about 100 Years of Solitude. I could recognize why it was such an important book when it was written, but I didn't really necessarily have this historical knowledge to fully appreciate it. And I also didn't love how difficult it was to read, even though I recognize how important it was. And that can be a difficult book to rate. I don't think it deserves a bad rating, but I also didn't necessarily love reading it, so where does that go? Then you have some people like Traveling Through Books or the Library of Alexandria who both say they don't get why people don't like star ratings. So they're just fully on the side, and I think most of you were. Some people talked about liking the emotions system, which you could famously see on Book of the Month. I actually personally hate that. I always feel like there's never enough emotions to really describe how I feel, but maybe if you had a personal emotion system, that would work. I also had someone send me a very cool blog post about all of their feelings about star ratings. And one thing they brought up that I thought was super interesting is that one of the problems with star ratings is that it is a confined system when you don't know how many things you will read in the future. So to explain that, they're saying, okay, you have stars 1 through 5, and this book right now may be a 5-star, one of the best books you've ever read, but you cannot know which books and how many books you will read in the future. And what if you read a book that is even greater than this other 5-star book? And that scale is so limiting. And I thought that was such an interesting way to put it, that we're trying to define something that is really undefined because we will never know how we feel about books in the future. We will never know how many books we'll read and how a 5-star will compare to a future 5-star. That's why I think overall, I like the star rating as a ballpark, but I understand it's a flawed system, but a necessary flawed system. So in conclusion, I think what's interesting is that star ratings in general are actually kind of a new thing when you think of a mass star rating. We really haven't had the ability to have regular people give their opinions, and because of that, it's less tied to the reviewer. Unlike professional reviewers in well-established magazines or newspapers, we're just random people on the internet that you may or may not get to know, which is why I think it's important to establish relationships with reviewers that you particularly like if you really are interested in star ratings. I like them. I think they're a necessary evil. I will continue using them on my Instagram. But I would love to know what your guys' thoughts are on this. Did you even know this was a debate? What side do you fall on? Please let me know. And as always, if you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading and my star ratings for books, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.